one of those occasions for us to study and to try and understand what the requests are of the congregation. So at this time, I'm going to share my screen just so that we can study together. So here we go. So I've put my study sheet onto the board so that everyone can see. I can only see you along the side of my screen for those of you who are wondering. So I'm not going to be able to see all of you, but I'm going to do the best I can. Please unmute yourselves, and when you need to share a thought, please do, and I'm going to ask different people to read. Our topic for tonight is the power of red, but it's more than just the power of red. Our topic for this evening really is about how we deal in many ways with superstition and with other areas of life. And so that's what our study is going to be about this evening. Not just about superstition, as you'll find out in the beginning. So at this time, Chuck, can you see my screen?
Yes, I can.
Okay, would you like to read this section from Ginsburg's Legends of the Jews for us, please?
Okay, so this is the divine resolution to bestow a companion on Adam met the wishes of man, who had been overcome by a feeling of isolation when the animals came to him in pairs to be named. To banish his loneliness, Lilith was first given to Adam as wife. Like him, she had been created out of the dust of the ground. But she remained with him only a short time because she insisted upon enjoying full equality with her husband.
Which is why today's movement of women, or a long time ago, was called Lilith, and there was a magazine called Lilith because of the equality that she so wanted in her life right from the beginning, because according to Jewish tradition, men and women were created as one in some of the traditions in the Torah, and then God separated them into two. Go ahead, Chuck.
She derived her rights from their identical origin. With the help of the ineffable name, which she pronounced, Lilith flew away from Adam and vanished in the air. Adam complained before God that his wife he had given him had deserted him, and God sent forth 3 angels to capture her. They found her in the Red Sea, and they sought to make her go back with the threat that unless she went, she would lose 100 of her demon children daily by death. But Lilith preferred this punishment to living with Adam. She takes her revenge by injuring baby boys during the first night of their life, while baby girls are exposed to her wicked designs until they are 20 days old. The only way to ward off the evil is to attach an amulet bearing the names of her 3 angel captors to the children, for such had been the agreement between them.
So how many of you placed a red bendel on your child's crib, on your child's, on a diaper bag, on your child's wrist? And how many of you knew that one of the reasons that you did that was because of the fact that Adam had a first wife, and for women's equality and her place in the world, she was willing to give up everything, and instead of becoming the woman who we all speak of in the positive, became one of the demonic figures in Jewish life. And to protect our children, we place some kind of amulet upon them to protect them. Notice that the amulet that was used back in the time, according to Professor Ginsburg, was the 3 angels' captors' names in order to protect the children. Now let's take a look at the second piece. Let's see, Rena, would you like to read from Bereshit Rabbah, which is the Midrash? We can't hear you, Rena. You need to unmute yourself.
And the child,
Yes, please.
he was 27 years old. Yet you say, putting it on her shoulder and the child. This, however, teaches that Sarah cast an evil eye on him, whereupon he was seized with feverish pains. The proof lies in the verse, and the water in the bottle was spent, a sick person drinking frequently.
Thank you. So who is this talking about? This is talking about Sarah, our matriarch. And the child who's 27 years old is Ishmael. And here is a Jewish woman, and we all know that we have to be careful, and I'm not saying this about Jewish women, but we know that people like to cast evil aspersions upon others. And who is the first one who really does this? No other than Sarah herself, who casts an evil eye upon Abraham's first son from the concubine Hagar. Now the question is, if Lilith is able to place an evil eye upon your child and cause harm to your child, and Sarah is even able to do the same, and Ishmael at that time was 27 years old, how do we ward ourselves off from that evil eye? What are the ways we ward evil eye off in our lives? Anyone tell me what you use besides that red bendel? Anybody have thoughts of what the evil eye is that you use? How you ward it off? Anyone have ideas of what you might use?
One can say bli ayin hara.
One can say bli ayin hara, which means
Without the evil eye. Let him get out of here.
without the evil eye. And how do you say that in Yiddish?
Ayin hara.
Ka'ayin hara, right. And what do people add after ka'ayin hara?
Poo, poo, poo.
Poo, poo, poo. Today people just say poo, poo, poo. They don't say ka'ayin hara, poo, poo, poo. They just say poo, poo, poo. And what's that supposed to do? Ward off the evil eye. Ward off the evil eye. What else do you use to ward off an evil eye?
I've seen somebody put bags of intestines and offal.
Yep, absolutely. That is something. What else?
Well, Gail says
wood.
the hamsa, is a hamsa used?
A chamsa, the hands, is one used in many different traditions.
And a red ribbon.
The red ribbon, which has 7 strands on it, which Madonna made famous, the Kabbalah kind of strand. What else? So when I was a little boy, I used to see a lot of people, especially women, walking like this. Anybody know why were they walking like this? Because they had chayitis. Anybody know what chayitis is?
Bent over?
Why were they bent over? Why is it called chayitis? Because they took this thing called a chai, the yud and the chet, which spells life, and they bought a gold chain or not a gold chain or what have you, but it wasn't a small chai. They were wearing these big chais, as big as they possibly could be, to do what? To ward off the evil eye. What else would people wear besides a chai?
Jewish star.
The Jewish star, and we talked about that at services the other day when we said the Jewish star, or is called the Magen David. What's a Magen? A Magen is a shield that protects you, and it was 2 triangles that when you flipped them and put them together made 6 triangles, and you were warding the evil eye off because you were pushing the evil eye away from you by the triangles becoming smaller. Okay. Now, let's read the next section. Lenny, would you like to read it for us?
Okay. Many mothers and grandmothers tie red ribbons and strings to children's underwear and bedding to prevent the evil appear. The color red is significant within Jewish history because it was one of the items necessary for the building of the original temple. Red thread and dye were used to make fabric. The red thread came from a type of worm. Rabbi S.R. Hirsch points out that the worm was the lowest form of life, and yet it was intrinsic to the building of the sanctuary. The red thread, reminiscent of the lowly worm, can be seen as protection against this. Each time a person looks at the string, he is reminded that a person is really as lowly as a worm. This humility is the ultimate weapon against the evil eye. The mashallah, the verbal amulet to ward off evil.
So, mashallah is one way you can ward off the evil eye, but if you take a look very carefully, red was so very important in the creation of the temple. We'll get back to this in a minute. That the fabric that was used contained a specific color of red that we'll get back to. And that color of red thread is it says here, is reminiscent of the lowly worm. And each time you look at red, what are you supposed to be thinking about at that moment? You're supposed to be thinking about that lowly worm in the ground, and it's a specific worm. And when you see it, it's supposed to remind you that you're supposed to be humble. And therefore, what is one of the reasons why we need to be humbled? Because so many of us aren't always living life in a humble way. And according to this midrash, we need to use red to remind ourselves of the worm and how we shouldn't be arrogant and we shouldn't be as proud as sometimes we can be. And the best way to take care of that is humility. And if we have that humility just as the lowly worm does, then we can ward off the evil eye. You'll find out in a few minutes why it's the worm that is being discussed. So what is the most famous story of red that you know in Jewish tradition that wards off any kind of not only evil, but any kind of bad that's happening to people? Anyone have a thought?
The door
Pesach.
Pesach. Good. What about Pesach?
The doorpost was smeared with the blood.
The doorpost was painted with the blood of the sacrifice, so that when God and his angel came by to smite the firstborn, when there was blood on the doorpost, then what happened?
The angel
God passed over. The idea here is red, and the idea is also blood. Both of those significantly play in warding off the evil eye and to ward off the punishment that was meted out to the specific case here of the firstborn. Now, what I want you to think about as you think about Passover and the blood and all of those things is, what happened if you were an Israelite and you didn't paint your lintel with blood? Anyone know? God didn't pass over your home. So if you didn't have the faith in God to believe in the red and in blood and painting over your door lintel, then you weren't a part of the Israelite nation and you weren't saved. And the plague still was upon you. Now, let's take a look at the next section. And that is on Yom Kippur, we read about the fact that Aaron has to serve as the leader of the Israelite nation. And as he serves as the leader of prayer and ritual for the Israelite nation, what does he have to do on Yom Kippur? What's his responsibility? Anyone know? His responsibility is to seek atonement for the Israelite nation. Now, how does he do that? Bruce, would you like to read for us, please?
Okay, thank you. Aaron shall then offer his bull of sin offering to make expiation for himself and his household. He shall slaughter his bull of sin offering, and he shall take a panful of glowing coals, scooped from the altar before the Lord, and 2 handfuls of finely ground aromatic incense, and bring this behind the curtain. He shall put the incense on the fire before the Lord, so that the cloud from the incense screens the cover that is over the ark of the pact, lest he die. He shall take some of the blood of the bull and sprinkle it with his finger over the cover on the east side. And in front of the cover he shall sprinkle some of the blood with his finger 7 times. He shall then slaughter the people's goat of sin offering, bring its blood behind the curtain, and do with its blood as he has done with the blood of the bull. He shall sprinkle it over the cover and in front of the cover. Thus he shall purge the shrine of the uncleanness and transgression of the Israelites. Uncleanness and transgression of the Israelites, whatever their sins. And he shall do the same for the tent of meeting, which abides with them in the midst of their uncleanness.
So thank you. So as we read this section in the Torah, and what Aaron is required to do as part of the atonement of the Israelite nation, he goes into the Holy of Holies, and before the ark, he takes the blood of the sacrifice and he throws it onto the curtain. And in doing so, he removes the sin from the Jewish nation. Once again, protecting them from the power of God through the act of the color of red and of blood. These are just things I want you to keep on remembering as we go through. How do you say red in Hebrew?
Adom.
Adom. And if you take a look on the word Adom, you will find that within the word Adom comes the word dam. Dam means
Blood.
Blood.
blood. And so therefore, part of what we're going to understand is that dam and Adom, red and blood, are very important in the power of assuaging God, assuaging Lilith, and assuaging any of the other demons. What else do you find in the word Adom and in the word dam? They're all derivatives of Adam, which means
Adam.
man. And man is Adam, correct? And so therefore man is created from blood and has blood within him. And that blood, as we all know, is red. And therefore, if you want to protect life and preserve life, blood is a very important part of that reality in protection. And where did man come from?
Adamah.
Adamah, which also has dam in it and also has Adom in it. So that therefore, whenever you use red, the concept is that you're returning, what does it say in the Torah? From dust you come, and to dust you return is our concept. And so therefore, if you need to find expiation, if you need to remove any of the demons that surround you, you need to find the dam in the Adam, and you find that by returning yourself to the Adamah, to the earth, which you can't necessarily do in life. And so you use the dam to find a way to protect yourself from any of the demons. Now, I gave you this in the Hebrew so that you could see precisely how that has evolved. God formed man, vayitzer. The word vayitzer has many interpretations to it. Vayitzer means, anybody know?
Production.
He formed. And if you take a look, how many yuds are in there? In the word vayitzer. There are 2 yuds. Anybody know why there are 2 yuds?
I didn't want you to sign early.
It's the future.
It's the future. Good. That's 1. What else? And that's very good because it's the future promise that we're trying to protect of God. What else are 2 yuds? God's name is one of them. God is written with 2 yuds. There's one more. According to the rabbis, there are 2 yuds because God created us in us a yetzer. What's a yetzer?
Urge.
An inclination, an urge. And he gave us an urge. He gave us how many urges? Why is there 2 yuds? He gave us 2 inclinations. What are those 2 inclinations?
The good urge and the bad urge?
The good urge and the bad urge. And according to tradition, there are only 3 times when you need both the good urge and the bad urge to work together. Otherwise, they should be separated and you should control your yetzer. And as we think about that very carefully, God created our yetzer, our urges, and we have to try to control them. And part of the way we control them is through Adam, through the dam that comes as the afar, the earth or the dust from where? From the Adamah, from the ground which is red. And from that, we have Nishmat Chayim. Neshama is what? Anybody know?
Soul.
The soul, and Chayim is life. So if we want our soul of life to continue spiritually and we want to be fine, we have to take something red to make sure that our neshama remains chaya, that our life remains and our soul remains alive. And if we're not careful and we're not humble, then our life will turn in the opposite direction. In the Torah, there is one specific color that's related to red that protects us other than the red of blood. And that red is called shani. And it comes from the tola'at, which is best known as crimson. And it's called tola'at shani, is what crimson is known as. Tola'at is the worm, and shani is red. And as you read through this next piece from Rashi that actually is from Midrash Tanchuma, it says, what is the remedy he should use that he may be healed? Let him, abandoning pride, regard himself lowly as a worm, as a tolat, and as a hyssop. And as the Hebrew says, shani, the word translated as tolat, shani, is actually scarlet, which was obtained from where? The body of the worm, a specific type of worm. And so therefore, if you want to remove the evil and you want to have power over evil, you need red. But specifically, you need the red of Tola'at Shani. You need the red of the worm itself from the body of that worm in order to protect you. Now, the Hebrew word for crimson or red, that red is Shani. If you know gematria, what is gematria, by the way? Anybody know?
The use of letters for numbers.
Good. Numerology, where you take letters in equal numbers, where Aleph is 1, Yud is Tet as an example, Bet is 2, Yud is 10, Nun is 50, and Sheen is 300. Together they equal 360. Anybody have an idea what 360 is?
Days of the year.
A circle?
Oh, good. A circle is very good. The circle of life, excellent. I love that. Excellent. I'm glad you found one piece. There's 360 degrees in a circle, so you can come back around full circle to where life began. A second concept of 360.
Days of the year.
365.
20 high.
20 times high. Very good. And high, 10 times high is God times high times 2. So you're doubling your opportunity to literally find life, to find chayim. Now, if you take that same gematria, and by the way, I asked Ella to try and help me find this. Ella, I had to work this out on my own and try to remember what I had figured out before. So I wasn't able to find what I was looking for, but this works just the same. So if you take Tolat, the worm, and Shani, and you put them together, the count, trust me, is 1266. So now if you go into numerology, into gematria, and you find a verse, that's what we do, by the way, in Judaism. We try to find a verse that equals that same gematria. This is the gematria we come up with. Admat Yisrael b'yom bo gog al v'haya b'yom ahu. On that day when Gog set foot on the soil of Israel, declares, Lord God, my raging anger shall flare up. Anybody know what this is about? It comes from Ezekiel. So this is the war of Armageddon, according to Ezekiel. And according to Ezekiel, before the Messiah can come, and some of you have heard me say this at services before, what has to happen?
Armageddon.
There has to be Armageddon. It's actually called the war of Gog and Magog. And God's rage will flare up at that moment, and the world will be destroyed as we know it, and the Mashiach will then come, the Messiah will then come. How do you get rid of 1266, which is what all these words are all about? You replace it with 1266. And what do you replace the 1266 with the war of Gog and Magog? In order for it not to happen? Red crimson. And anything that you put on yourself or around your child or anywhere should protect you from that final declaration of the war of the world, which we hope we shall never see. Now let's take a look in the book of Proverbs. Seema, would you like to read for us the English, please?
Thank you. She is not worried, for her household because of snow, for her whole household is dressed in crimson.
Thank you.
Okay.
Let's stop there. So this is Proverbs 31:21. Does anyone know what else is found in Proverbs 31:21 or in 31? A man says this every Friday night at the dinner table to his wife.
It's Ashes Chayil.
It's Ashes Chayil, a woman of valor who can find. She's worth far more than precious.
And rubies.
Rubies. What color are rubies?
Red.
Ah, there we go. So here she is. She's more precious than rubies that protect you because of the color red. The husband's asking for protection upon his wife. And we should not be worried in her household because she's not worried. Because when it comes to snow, God willing, in a few weeks it should snow just so we can see it, and then we never see it again for the rest of the winter. Though we do need it. She's not worried. Why is she not worried?
It says all the house is clothed in lavesh shanim, in clothing of crimson.
Right, because the wife who knows, the mother, the woman of valor, during the winter will dress her household in red crimson, protecting them from the demon of the snow. Now, let's take a look what the Tanchum on Rashi tells us about this specific verse about that crimson. And what does she say? Roz. It says it right here.
All of these save them from the snow. How would you say that?
Gehenom.
In Hinnom.
This is not the snow angel. This is the opposite. What is Gehenom?
Hell.
Gehenom is hell. Gehenom is the netherworld. And so therefore, if you want to save your child from the snow Gehenom, your child has to wear crimson. The power of red protects your child from the demon of snow. And we shouldn't worry in our households because our children are wearing red. And maybe we are too. But it's even more than that. So, Richie, would you like to read from us from the book of Exodus 26:1?
Thank you. As for the tabernacle, make it of 10 strips of cloth. Make these of fine twisted linen, of blue, purple, and crimson yarns, with a design of cherubim worked into them.
So, a lot of the temple that was made in the wilderness by the children of Israel as they're going through the desert was created out of linen. They used blue linen, they used purple linen, and what was the third color?
Crimson.
Crimson. And it actually says in Hebrew, Tolat Shani. And what should be the design?
A braid.
Of?
Angels.
Of cherubim. What do we know about Kruvim? Where are they found? Anyone know? They're
Aren't they on top of the tabernacle or on top of the ark? Did they supposed to have two cherubim?
There were two Kruvim on the ark.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah.
Correct. You're absolutely right. One was a male and the other was a female, some say, and some were both male, and they looked at each other. And if you make your yarn of cheruvim, then what are you doing if you're using the red? You are fighting off the demon. Not only that, but the fact is that if it was made for the Aron, and it was for God's protection and for us to look at God and to turn in servitude to God and to praise God, and they were protecting God and they were announcing that God was there. If you use that same symbol, even though it doesn't have cherubim on it, but rather crimson color, you're protecting yourself because of the fact that red, the crimson, once again protects you because the angels are warding off Lilith and the other demons, such as Satan, who is there to cause you harm. Now let's look at the next section, and I'm looking through to see who's here, who can share. Debbie, can you? Well, actually, I'll read. Could you read for me the next section, please?
Sure.
From Isaiah.
For I, the Lord, am your God, who grasped your right hand, who say to you, have no fear, I will be your help. Fear not, O worm Jacob, O men of Israel. I will help you, declares the Lord. I, your Redeemer, the Holy One of Israel.
Thank you. So what do you notice here that's rather interesting that you never thought about before? We should fear not, O worm of Jacob. God is there to be our Redeemer, says Isaiah. That's the color of scarlet as best I can see it, or the color of crimson. Techelet Shani, even though it doesn't say it here, the representation of the worm is fear not, because as long as there is Tolat Shani in your Mishkan, in your tabernacle, and on you, then I, God, will redeem you from any harm that can come your way. The power of red. Not only that, it is the blood that makes atonement by reason of the life. Why is it important that blood makes atonement? Because as we said before, blood is the life of man, and anytime you use that same color, it does represent that for you, that it changes whatever is red back to white for you. So much so that let's take a look in the Mishnah. Barbara, would you like to read it for us, the Mishnah?
Thank you. Mishnah Yoma, right there.
Yes, please.
4:2 relates that the scarlet wool was tied around the throat of the sin offering goat to be slaughtered in the temple area and around the head of the scapegoat. The wool's function at this stage was purely technical to distinguish between the two he-goats, each set aside for the purpose chosen for it by lot, V8. It also prevented the scapegoat from getting mixed up with other goats on the way to the wilderness. Otherwise, tying the wool on one goat would have sufficed.
So the point that this interpretation is making here is that on Yom Kippur, what is one of the things that we read about in the Torah that the high priest would do? Anyone know?
Release the goat.
He would take two goats. One goat would be slaughtered, and one goat would be followed by another priest and taken to Azazel. And Azazel actually is another demon. And if you've ever been to Jerusalem, you know that Azazel is actually a pit somewhere outside of the wall of Jerusalem where this goat would be dispatched to. And as you read this, what would they do with the scapegoat, with this goat? What would they put on the goat?
A ribbon.
They would put on a thread of scarlet, of techelet shani, with a bell on it so that they could hear it as it was making its way to wherever it was going. And as you think about this, what was the reason for putting the red on the scapegoat? To distinguish it from the other goats. Why is that very important, to distinguish it from other goats? And why was the priest required to be there during that period of time? Anyone have a thought? The priest was there to watch it, to make sure it got to its rightful place, to protect the goat along its journey, and to make sure that other goats, whatever happened to them, that wasn't his responsibility, but the priest had a responsibility to protect everyone else, but specifically that goat. And so that red, when we wear it, is the same as the goat was wearing, to protect us from the evil eye and from any demon or anybody who walks across, to ensure that we are protected in that same way. So much so that what happens, how else do we atone so we can be protected once again? Well, the Torah has the story of the leper. What's a leper? Anyone know?
Someone with leprosy.
Oh, it may not be, but a leper was what we call them. What was there? Why were they a leper according to the rabbis?
They were outcast?
They were outcast. Why were they outcast?
They were impure.
Good. Now the question is, why were they impure? And the answer is
because they
damage to their skin.
No, because they did lashon hara.
Ah, very good. Because they did lashon hara, which means
they said bad things about other people.
They spoke bad things about other people, and because they spoke bad things about other people, Therefore, they were afflicted with a skin that may not be leprosy. Some people today say it's Hansen's disease, but their skin turned white. How did they get out of leprosy? How were they cured?
They had to live outside of the community for a certain amount of time.
And what did they have to do as they came into the community? Be checked by the priest?
They had to be checked by the priest before they could come back in.
But they also had to scream out that they were a leper.
Oh.
The same way that they literally had talked evil about other people, part of what they had to do is now talk bad about themselves. Stay away from me, I'm a leper. I'm making my way to the Kohen. Stay away from me, I'm a leper. And once they were cured, how were they cured? Let's take a look and see what it says. Elise, could you read that for us, please?
The priest shall, from number 5?
Yes, please.
The priest shall order one of the birds slaughtered over fresh water in an earthen vessel, and he shall take the live bird along with the cedar wood, the crimson stuff, and the hyssop, and dip them together with the live bird in the blood of the bird that was slaughtered over the fresh water. He shall then sprinkle it 7 times on him who is to be cleansed of the eruption, and cleanse him, and he shall set the live bird free in the open country.
This is how he becomes cleansed. The end part is that crimson is involved, red is involved once again in removing the leprosy or the Hansen's disease or the white from him. Now I'm moving up here again because I want you to see the statement in Isaiah and how important it is with regard to the red. From the verse, be your sins like crimson. So that when you're wearing crimson, your sins should be like the crimson. And what happens to crimson? It can turn to snow white. So just as your sins can boil your blood, so to speak, and make your complexion turn red, you can also once again turn back to snow white. And by wearing red, you're reminding yourself to be humble. And once you become humble, you turn to white as snow white again, and you are just as you were before. Red protects us. It also protects our home. So at this time, I'm looking to see who else can read. Linda, are you there? Can you read for us?
Yes, here I am. Thank you. So I'm reading number 2.
You're reading number 4.
Okay. Thank you. We were making it bigger. This shall be the service of the sons of Kohath in the tent of meeting about the most holy things. And when the camp sets forward, Aaron shall come and his sons, and they shall take down the covering veil and cover the ark of testimony with it, and shall put on it the covering of goat skins, and shall spread over it a cloth wholly of blue, and shall put it in its poles. And upon the table of the bread of display they shall spread a cloth of blue, and put on the dishes and the spoons and the bowls and the jars for pouring out, and continual bread shall be on it. And they shall spread upon them a cloth of scarlet, and cover the same with a covering of goat skins, and shall put it in its poles.
So this is when the children of Israel are walking through the wilderness, when they're walking through the desert, and they are taking their camp and disassembling it. You will notice that even the house of meeting, that means the Mishkan, God's house, had to be protected. There was only one way they could protect the house of God itself from any casting of aspersion upon them, such as the prophet Balaam did against the Jewish people when he was hired to do so. They had to spread a cloth of scarlet over the tabernacle itself, over the pieces, in order to even protect God's house. Because when they had God's house, they didn't have to worry because they had the protection of God. But when the children of Israel were walking through the wilderness and the tent was disassembled, the tent needed its protection, as did the people. The cloth of scarlet, tolat shani, protected the people. Now, if you take a look at the next section, you'll see that this section is about the para aduma. What's a para aduma? Does anyone know?
Red cow or a red heifer?
A red heifer. When do we need a red heifer?
When a priest is contaminated by a corpse.
When a Kohen, right? When you mean a priest, you're talking about a Kohen, is contaminated by a corpse. Why do we need the red heifer when a priest is contaminated by a corpse?
Because the blood will actually absorb the impurity.
Okay, the blood will...
all of the red concoction.
That is correct. And since the red will absorb, the death will absorb within the priest, the Kohen himself has to purify himself, or what can't he do? He can't serve in the house of God. A Kohen has to be pure, which is why, what aren't Kohanim allowed to do?
Go into a cemetery.
They can't go into a cemetery.
Right.
So if a Kohen comes in touch or near a corpse, and remember, Kohanim's parents and Kohanim's loved ones passed away too, so there was no way, and Kohanim died too, so there's no way of not being near a corpse. The way to once again take that individual and make them spiritually whole was by using the ashes of the red heifer. And the red heifer we haven't seen in thousands of years. The red heifer is one that doesn't even have two hairs that are red. And we came close a few years ago where someone thought they had a red heifer. And then when someone came to check it, all of a sudden there was a third or fourth hair, and it was no longer considered to be one that could be used. And everyone was before that thinking that the Messiah was going to come because they found the red heifer. And then Kohanim needed in order to be able to go back into the temple, which we would then need to rebuild. Now, within the ashes that the Kohanim created in order to sprinkle upon that Kohen was crimson. They used crimson dye to ensure that the tolat shani, that red was there to absorb the demon from those individuals. Now, we only have time for a couple more things, and I'm going to stop. But I want you to look at this story rather quickly. This is the story of Joshua. And Joshua sends into the city of Jericho, into the city of Jericho, some spies. Now, this is the second case. The first time was with Moses. And when the spies went in, they made a promise to the woman named Rahab, or Rachav, in relationship to the fact that she protected them. And how did she protect them? Because the king found out that the Israelite spies were there, and they were coming to take them and to assassinate them. So what did Rahab do? Anybody remember the story?
She helped them escape.
How did she help them escape, Diane?
She let them out a window to go over the wall of the city.
And what did she use to lend them to put them down the wall?
A rope?
A cord.
A red cord.
There we go. It's down here. She put a scarlet thread. And she then also was required, when the Israelite warriors were surrounding Jericho, were surrounding Jericho, and what was she required to do so that her house would be protected from being attacked and being decimated by the Hebrew warriors that were now in the land of Canaan and were going to destroy Jericho?
Put the cord out the window again.
That's right. She had to put the scarlet cord out the window in order to protect herself. So as we see the crimson so far, we're seeing that crimson is used as a sign to protect. So much so that when Tamar, in the story of the Torah with Judah and Tamar, that when her son was born, actually she had twins, one of them had a crimson thread attached around him by the midwife to protect him from other demons, and that everyone would know that he was the firstborn son, and he was entitled to his rights as the firstborn son. And so as you see, red and crimson has a great deal of power within them. It begins, as we stated originally, with the concept of Tolat Shani, of crimson, that we need to be humble in our own ways, but more importantly, we need to understand that we have the power not of red, but the power of our own selves to protect ourselves and to know when to say poo, 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 and how to protect ourselves from the ayin hara. I know that my mother as a child used to do many things to protect me from the ayin hara. Clearly red wasn't enough. Some of you might remember, and we only have a couple of minutes, my mother used to make me do this. Can everyone see what I'm doing?
Yeah, chew.
I'm taking my thumb and I'm putting it between my teeth.
Mhm.
Anybody know why my mother made me do that?
Keep you safe?
To keep me
Rabbi,
safe from
Rabbi,
what?
when my grandmother would sew on me, she
Yeah.
would make me chew a thread so she wouldn't sew my brains together. And when she cut something that I was wearing, I would have to chew the thread so she wouldn't cut my brains out.
That's correct. And that's why when my
used to have to bite my tongue.
sewed a button on my shirt and it was still on me, you know,
Yes.
a button would fall off and we're on our way somewhere. And she'd say, wait a second, don't take off your shirt. I'm just going to sew the button back on.
And you put your finger between your teeth.
I had to put my thumb between my teeth so that she wouldn't sew my brains up.
And mine was with a thread. I had to chew the thread.
And I had to bite my tongue.
And
You
I
had to
just
bite
had
your
to
tongue.
chew.
Yeah.
Mine was a thread too. My grandfather used to have me chew on the thread.
Yeah.
Isn't it interesting that we all had these different things that we used to do? Now, you may remember that all the way, that red also has another theme to it, which I didn't put in here from the Torah. The colors of the threads were red and gold. And what was the third one?
Purple.
Purple.
Blue. Blue.
Purple.
What does blue represent?
The ocean. Sky.
And the ocean might, yes. What else?
The sky.
The sky. And what does the sky then take you to?
God.
God.
God. So that by having the red and the blue, the red would lead you to blue. The blue would then lead you to what? To God. And you would not only be humble through the red of crimson, but you'd also be humbled, and God would then be your redeemer. And then the Gog and Magog in your own personal life wouldn't happen to you. And so therefore, red is very important. And that's one of the reasons that people will wear that red
ribbon
on their left arm. Anyone know why left arm?
Closer to the heart.
Closest to your.
Close to your heart is absolutely right.
Yeah.
And the other reason, for anybody who's a righty, it's the same place you put your tefillin. Why do you put your tefillin on your left hand? It's your weakest limb. The left is weaker than the right. And so therefore, to provide you with
Unless you're
protection
lefty.
during the
Unless you're
day,
lefty.
Unless you're a lefty.
Oh, yeah, unless
you
you're a
put it on
lefty.
your right.
Uh,
You put your tefillin on your right hand if you're a lefty. There are tefillin that are made for lefties.
But also
And it
you
goes
get
on your
married
right
with the
hand.
ring on the left hand. When you're married, the ring goes on your left.
No, actually, when
No,
you're
it goes on
correct,
your
but
right.
when
I
you're
mean,
married in
oh, it goes on your
Judaism,
right and then it switches to your
it
left.
goes on your
Right.
Right, right.
and then it's put over to your left,
Yeah.
right?
Yes, yes.
Correct.
And very important that it's put over to your left. And by the way, anybody know why that red band has 7? Why, you know, when you wear a red band, I don't know if you know this, but at least the Kabbalah band has 7 strands. When we put on tefillin, we have 7 strands. When a wife walks around her husband, a bride, or
Walks around
today
7
they
times.
split it 7 times. Besides the fact of the verses that are related to 7 experiences of love of God, and therefore a love of a wife as well too, and a husband, there are 7 names of what I showed you before, the Yetzer, the inclination of Ra, the evil inclination. If you want to protect yourself completely, it should have 7 strands and it should be red. And therefore, you protect yourself not only from demons, but from your own evil inclination, which is then creates that opportunity for you to find Tovah in your own personal life. No different than wearing a chai or putting mezuzah on your front door. And with that, we have 2 minutes. Any questions? And I want to thank you, everyone, for joining us. Yes,
Thank
Linda.
you.
Question, Rabbi.
Rabbi, in
Question?
Okay, one at a time.
In Schindler's List, a black and white film, the only color was of the little girl in a red coat walking across the field.
I remember that.
And I always wondered about that. And you helped me so much tonight.
Because you now understood what that red was about.
Yes, to save the people,
Absolutely.
to protect them.
Very good. Absolutely correct. There was another person who had a question?
Yes, I had a question, Rabbi.
Yes.
Does your comment about the Kohen not coming in contact with a corpse, does that mean a Kohen should not sit with a body overnight?
That is, a Kohen is not permitted near a body whatsoever. In Toronto, where I grew up, they created funeral homes where behind the podium where the rabbi stands, there is a separate room that's a glass, and they pipe in the sound of the service, and they can see in and you can see them, but it's separated by glass, 2 pieces of glass, so it's not the same room. Where I was born in Toronto, in the same case, they had brisses were done where? When I was born, they were done in the hospital.
Right.
Not mine, but others were done in the hospital. And as you take a look in they had a separate wing in the hospital that was called the Brit Milah ward. Or bris ward, where they had rotating doors going around specifically so that a Kohen could come into that part of the hospital and not be in the other part of the hospital where the baby would be brought in through the rotating doors. So the Kohen could witness the bris of, let's say, a relative's child without any concern about getting the tumah of the deceased, of the corpse.
In Israel, they have signs whenever there is a dead person in the hospital, warning Kohanim not to come in.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And on that note, it is 7:30. And as I've promised everyone, I would stop in time for Minyan. Now, here's the other thing that I want you all to know. Every second week at 12:15, we run a lunch and learn program. The last time we started on a topic of the power of God and the power of man. We're continuing it not this Thursday, but next Thursday. It runs for an hour. If you'd love to join us, we'd love for you to participate with us. On that night, I wish everyone an Erev Tov, a good night. And please log on to Minyan. And thank you for joining together with me. Who's next week? Ella? Oh, Ella's cut off. So
No,
please.
Dan
Dan Bender?
I'm looking forward to studying with Dan because Dan, I'm sure, has a most wonderful topic, and Dan does a lot of reading, and I'm sure we're all going to look forward to studying together with Dan next week. On that, I wish you a wonderful evening.
I don't know how wonderful it is, but it'll hopefully at least be thought-provoking.
You know what, Dan? As you've
I'm
always
sorry?
said to me, it's the thought-provoking discussions that are most important. So I'm looking forward to, instead of my providing that thought-provoking moment for you, that you can provide that thought-provoking for all of us as well too.
No pressure.
No pressure, Dan. Have a good evening, everyone. I must make my way to Minyan.